The storm had swallowed the horizon whole when she stumbled onto the ranch, the wind clawing at her dress, the snow grinding against her boots until every step felt like walking through glass. She had no place left to go. Town had turned its back. Neighbors closed their doors. And so she clutched the only bargain she had left in the world, her hands, her labor, her willingness to clean floors for the mercy of a roof. By the time she reached the barn, her lips trembled with exhaustion, but her voice did not break. She called out through the blizzard, the words slipping like fragile arrows into the night. "Can I clean your barn for one night's sleep?" The wind almost stole them away, but they reached the ears of the man standing just beyond the door. He was tall, broad, a figure carved from years of solitude. His lantern burned a soft gold in the cold, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing eyes that rarely looked for company. For a moment he did not move. Her voice had pierced a silence he thought permanent, the sort of silence a man wears like armor after too much loss. He could not answer quickly because he no longer remembered how. She lowered her gaze, ashamed that her words had to be offered like coins, ashamed that her worth must be measured in chores. Her hands gripped the broom she carried as though it might prove her sincerity. Snow had gathered in her dark hair, melted down her cheeks, and frozen again into tiny crystals. She looked fragile but not broken, worn but unbent. From a farmhouse, another figure appeared, older, bent by time, dragging a limp leg through the drifts. Ezra, the ranch hand, had seen wanderers before and mistrusted them all. His voice cracked with scorn. "Strays bring nothing but trouble. Let her find another porch to beg from." The woman did not defend herself. She only stood there, broom in hand, the orange fabric of her frock dull under the moonlight. She did not flinch, though his words cut. Instead, she whispered again, softer now, that she could mend harnesses, sweep floors, scrub walls, anything to earn one night's rest. Her tone was neither pleading nor proud. It was steady, as if she had rehearsed rejection too many times to be wounded by it now. The cowboy still said nothing. The lantern flame quivered in the wind, throwing his shadow across the snow. He studied her with the unease of a man confronted by something he cannot name. It was not beauty that unsettled him, though she carried that quietly, but the stubborn dignity that clung to her despite the storm. She should have looked defeated. She did not. Ezra huffed, spitting into the snow. "The barn is already clean. No need for another pair of hands." He turned to retreat, muttering that charity softens men and weakens homes. His bitterness lingered like smoke. The cowboy finally found his voice. "Stay." The word rumbled low, unfamiliar, as though dragged from a place long unused. He offered nothing else, no explanation, no condition. Only that one word. The woman blinked, stunned. For a moment she thought she had misheard, but his eyes did not waver. He turned and walked back toward the house, the lantern still in his hand, leaving her alone in the glow that spilled across the snow. Inside the barn she found warmth from the animals, the smell of hay sharp but comforting. She set her broom to work though the floor was already swept, each stroke ringing like a prayer whispered into emptiness. Her shoulders ached, but movement steadied her. Work was her only shield, her only language. At the window of the farmhouse, the cowboy stood with his lantern extinguished, staring across the yard. He watched her kneel in the straw, her hands moving with quiet resolve. Something twisted in him. He had lived years without surprise, yet here she was, an intruder not of body, but of spirit. She did not ask for pity, nor did she crumple when denied. She worked as though sweeping away the memory of every closed door behind her. Ezra muttered again that she would bring storms into the house. But the cowboy heard only the scrape of her broom, steady and patient, echoing against the barn walls. It was the sound of endurance, and it unsettled him more than any outlaw's threat. He leaned against the window, arms crossed, jaw tight, and told himself it was only for one night. Yet the longer he watched, the more he feared it would not be so simple. He could already feel the silence he had worn for years beginning to crack. The storm raged on, beating against roof and fence, but the barn's lantern glowed soft against the dark. And in that fragile light he saw the truth he could not yet admit, that letting her stay, even for one night, might cost him far more than sending her away. The broom scraped once more, and she looked up toward the window, though she could not see him there. Still his breath caught. For a heartbeat he felt exposed, as though she knew he was watching, as though she had come not to seek shelter, but to test the fortress of his loneliness. And for the first time in years, the cowboy did not know whether he wanted the night to end. The morning did not arrive gently but broke hard and brittle, the sky pale as bone, the frost glittering sharp as knives across the yard. She woke stiff from the barn floor, her breath rising in faint clouds as she pulled herself up, Broom still by her side. The horses nickered at her, steam curling from their nostrils, and without waiting for invitation, she began her work again. Water was drawn, buckets hauled, the pails scrubbed until her raw hands ached. She moved like someone desperate to prove that her place had been earned, not given. From the porch, Ezra scowled, his shoulders hunched beneath a ragged coat. He spat into the snow and muttered that strays should be gone with the dawn. His words were sharp, but she did not falter. She only gripped the bucket tighter, as if weight itself could steady her. He shook his head, limped back inside, and cursed under his breath. The cowboy had been watching since before sunrise. His eyes followed her through every motion, measuring the stubborn rhythm of her labor. She had not slept well, that much was clear from the dark beneath her eyes, yet there was no complaint on her lips. She poured herself into the chores as if silence could be washed away with work. Something about her steadiness unsettled him more than defiance ever could. By midday, he broke the quiet. His voice, low and unused, drifted across the yard as he carried a cup of coffee in his hand. He stopped before her, his shadow long on the frozen ground, and for a moment she feared he would tell her to leave. Instead, he asked for her name. She gave it softly, hesitant, as though naming herself might invite its erasure. The syllables trembled, but did not vanish. He nodded once, then offered the steaming cup. Their hands brushed as she took it, the warmth bleeding into her fingers, and something in her chest tightened. For the first time since arriving, she felt seen, not pitted, not measured, but simply recognized. He did not question her further. He only stood beside her in the snow, watching the thin steam curl into the air. She sipped carefully, each swallow warming the hollow places inside her. Then, as if compelled to justify her presence, she spoke of a town left behind, of doors that shut when she knocked, of whispers that painted her as trouble, though she carried no crime. She said she had nowhere to go but forward, and all she asked was rest enough to continue. She did not tell all, but enough for him to know she had been turned away too often. He listened, his face unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. Yet inside him something shifted. He knew the taste of rejection, though he had carried it differently, hiding it in silence rather than words. For years, he had convinced himself that solitude was safer than any wound companionship might bring. But now, watching her fight to preserve her dignity, even as the cold gnawed at her bones, he wondered if solitude was not a shield but a slow kind of death. That night the wind rose again, clawing at the walls. He lit his lantern and stepped into the storm. The barn loomed ahead, its beams glowing faint in the dark. When he opened the door, the sight froze him in place. She stood brushing the mare, her hand gentle on the animal's neck, her lips moving in hushed tones as though sharing secrets with the creature. She looked up when the light fell across her, startled but steady. He held the lantern high, the glow casting long shadows across straw and timber. The same scene as last night, yet different. Yesterday, he froze because she was a stranger. Tonight he froze because he feared what it would mean if he let her go. Ezra's warning rattled in his mind, that attachments are chains and chains break men, but the words rang hollow against the ache rising in his chest. He drew a long breath, then spoke, his voice carrying more weight than any he had uttered in years. You need not leave. The barn is no place for you. There is fire in my house, warmth enough if you will take it. She stilled, the brush falling silent in her hand. For a heartbeat, she seemed caught between disbelief and caution. Then, slowly, she set the brush down and stepped toward him. The lantern flame quivered between them, brighter, fiercer, as though it knew it bore witness to a choice that would alter them both. He did not move until she stood within reach, her shadow mingling with his on the barn wall. The silence between them throbbed like a living thing, fragile yet unbroken. He opened the door wider, the storm howling behind him, and for the first time in years he felt the weight of loneliness begin to crack. And when she crossed that threshold beside him, her figure lit by the trembling lantern glow, he knew the night would not end as it had before. Something unnamed had begun, and it could not be undone.